Hello and welcome to Unprofessional Engineering, live from Autodesk Accelerate 2019. My name is James.
And you got Luke.
Luke, we're here wrapping the day up with Paul McGee, Director of Industrial Design at Crown Equipment. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
So before we get into what a director of, Industrial Design does, we like to play a little game to see if you're more of a James or if you're more of a Luke kind of person.
Why do you say it like that?
Well, after you talk to us for a while, you'll know why I say it like that. So let's start things off. What are you more into, 3D printing or CNC machining?
Oh, boy.
They're
That's
both great.
They're
both great.
I'm actually not sure I have a good answer for that. I think for me it's task dependent or kind of, I'm not sure I can give
You're on a desert island and you got to take a CNC machine or a 3D printer.
I'm going to take the printer.
Yeah, he is.
That's easy. See, I mean, you put me in that situation.
See, task.
So you really hurt yourself on that.
I did.
No, but if it was, hey, I've got to build parts for a car I'm building or something, I'm going CNC.
Let's go to the next one.
Next question. And I don't even know if this one might apply, so this one might be a pass. If you had to pick a CAD tool, Inventor or Fusion 360. I'm not sure if you guys are using Inventor or not.
We're not using Inventor. Okay. Fusion, I'd say Fusion's been pretty transformative for us.
Okay.
Simulation. Do you do any simulation?
We do.
FEA, which do you like better, FEA or CFD?
We don't need to do a lot of CFD, just as a function of what we're doing. We have potential future applications. Right now, it's all FEA.
Yeah, I like that. That's what I like to hear. Energy of the future, do you think it's going to be solar or wind power?
That's a tough one. Boy.
Tough questions here, I know.
That is a tough one. Let's see. I just spent 18 years in Cleveland, so it's hard to imagine solar.
I know, we think that too in Pittsburgh.
As I say, you grew up in kind of that section off the Great Lakes, and down from that, I don't know that we see the sun enough to consider solar. I'm going to have to go with wind.
Okay.
It's 50-50 now, isn't it?
No.
No, it is not.
No,
You're still winning.
But one more.
One more. The most important one,
important, yes.
Wings or tacos?
Tacos. That's not
fair.
even close.
Not even close.
Not even close. I don't even think about that.
I don't even know why you think wings are better.
A few people have picked wings.
My wife would go wings.
See?
Yeah.
But either way, you landed on Team James, so we're happy to have you. All right, so moving on. Let's hear a little bit about what it is that you do. What's your day look like?
So my day...
Let's pretend they all look the same.
Oh, they don't deviate a ton. So I'm, as you guys said, I'm director of industrial design for what we develop out of basically our core office, right? Most of our products are developed in New Bremen, Ohio for use in... They're global, but principally the North American market. So I've got a team of industrial designers, model makers, CAD specialists. I have a PhD of human factors engineering as part of my team. So I largely consider my job to facilitate them being successful at their jobs. That's a huge part of what I do. I'm a practicing industrial designer, as an educated industrial designer, but I frankly feel like my job is to help them be successful.
And give us to probably back up even a little bit further, what exactly is Crown known? Like, what do you make? We should probably start there.
Forgive me. So Crown Equipment is one of the top, at any given moment, top 4 or 5 players in the global purview for what we call lift trucks.
Okay.
Forklifts.
Okay.
We are definitely upper tier in North America, and specifically in what we call the warehouse, right? We cut them into 2 major buckets. There's what we call the warehouse and counterbalance. So counterbalance are the ones when you think of a traditional lift truck, the ones that kind of look like a car with forks on the front. That's a counterbalance. That's actually a very small portion of our business. Most of it is in the warehouse, which are a series of, if you consider a counterbalance truck like a Swiss Army knife that can do a little bit of everything, the bulk of our business is in warehouse trucks where they're trucks that are meant to do one task exceptionally well. And that's where we're really, really good.
Okay.
Can you drive a forklift?
Absolutely.
Don't you have to be certified?
You do have to be certified, and you are encouraged when you start to do that, and I'm kind of a bit of a gearhead, so that didn't exactly.
Okay.
It wasn't an issue.
Yeah, it wasn't like I fought that.
Okay.
Because I just imagine if that's James or I. You've seen those
Right.
YouTube videos where like the guy backs up and he knocks the entire
Yes.
warehouse down.
We see those videos.
I imagine that's me and James
For
if
sure.
we had to drive a
yeah.
forklift.
There are actually large events, particularly in Europe, that are actually called the equivalent of forklift rodeos, where people are actually judged
awesome.
on their ability to do these really insanely challenging tasks.
It's like the lumberjack games,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
with forklifts.
Very much so. Like you
Love
can
it.
watch a guy flip a coin by, flicking it with the end of a fork. I mean, really, really crazy stuff.
James can't flip a coin with his hand.
No, I'm bad at most things, and I assume forklift stuff is also in that
So
category.
I read. I don't know if it was in the description of the presentation, or if it
You're
was
real
maybe,
excited about this.
or it was the presentation, or if it was maybe on LinkedIn somewhere. I saw it said there's a human to forklift relationship, and my question is there any sort of surgery, biomedical implants, or anything that would make me look like Matt Damon from the movie Elysium?
You are actually touching on something that I have to be careful to not say too much about.
Okay.
You didn't expect that,
I
did
did
you?
not.
You did not say you thought you were playing, but what's interesting is the human is an incredibly important component of the exercise, right? I mean, when we range in our work from thinking about what role autonomy plays, where the human is essentially just telling the truck what to do and the truck goes and does it, but we're also looking very closely at the human. And so, for example, one of the larger innovations that Crown brought to market years ago was essentially a wearable item. Nothing quite as surgically implanted as Matt Damon might have worn, but for example, it's a glove they wear on their hand for people that, like, for example, when you place an order with Amazon,
Okay.
you're not buying a box of things, you're buying small items, right? Well, those things have to be picked from a warehouse and put together. The person who's doing that runs up and down aisles and pulls these things from the shelves. And we found the best way to make them efficient was to kill the redundant steps they would take back to the truck. And the best way to do that was to actually give them the ability to remote control the truck from something they had on their person.
Oh.
So from that was what we call Quick Pick and Quick Pick Remote. And
Okay.
it's a glove where if they're walking and they're moving down the aisle and they don't want to walk backwards to go back and get the truck, they hit a button and the truck comes to them.
That is, that's pretty cool.
I don't even know how to follow up with that. That's outstanding.
Well, pretty soon we'll just do it telepathically.
Yeah, all
right?
I need is
That'll
like
be the
I need a biomedical implant. I can just think, go pick me up a 65-inch plasma out of the warehouse.
We were just doing an episode on our podcast about, I'm not going to say mind control, but controlling drones just by thinking. So this
right.
is what you're going to be doing with the forklift soon. That's outstanding.
I wouldn't
maybe
go so
next
far as
week.
to say that we have that one active in the labs, but we are definitely thinking about the role that people play in the process always.
That's awesome.
So we saw your presentation today. We normally don't get to do that. We normally interview people on the off day, so this works out pretty well. So we got to see your presentation, and the title was Introducing Generative Design into a Resistant Culture. Explain what you mean by resist. I think I know what you mean by resistant culture, but I don't want to be presumptuous.
Sure. So, Crown's a very innovative company. In our industry, we'd like to think that we're the most innovative, right?
And you have mind-controlled forklifts, so I mean, I agree.
Or at least, remotely controlled forklifts. So, we feel strongly that we're good at innovating, but what you also have is a company with a lot of people that have been there for years and in many cases decades. Wonderfully smart people. They're responsible for the growth of the company. That being said, we've been a very successful company with incremental positive growth for years and years. At moments like that, when you're asking people to make positive forward change, sometimes they're on board, but sometimes they're not, just simply because they may not understand that change is needed. If things are good, why should I change? So when we originally started talking about generative design, it wasn't that everybody was resistant. A lot of people are really excited about it. It's potentially cool, brings some new ideas to the table, but you do have some people that really like the way they go about their things, and they're either threatened or maybe not clear on the value propositions of the new ideas.
Yeah.
So a large part of what I talked about today wasn't the technology or the tool. It was more trying to help people understand that the way you engage people when you're trying to bring a new idea in is as important as the thing you're trying to bring in.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed during your presentation, I didn't see the whole thing, I was in and out, but it seemed like a big part of this was education.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
And making sure that, it's really easy to show the pretty picture. Generative design looks really cool, and I think some people see that and they get excited. Other people see that and they might get nervous or not understand it. But could you talk about the education component a little bit?
You nailed it on the head when you talk about the way people consume it, right? The people that like change and exciting things see the pictures and they get really excited about it. But there's a lot of people that if it's too unfamiliar, they'll go the other way.
Yeah.
And what we wanted to try to get across in the education side was to simply kind of demystify it, right? To try and explain to people what was actually happening. They see this, they see it as organic, and they think it's, the designers are playing with voodoo or witchcraft or something that's not helpful. And no, actually, there's math and science behind this. This is actually how to make a part stronger while weighing less, optimizing materials. So that was the other portion. What we talked about was speaking in a language that's relevant to the people you're trying to have a conversation with.
So you've hit on like a lot of the big points of generative, stronger but lighter, still able to be made, all of these things. And during your presentation, which everyone's going to have access to be able to watch, you got into the education part of things, as well as thanks to Ghostbusters, how to maybe get people on board. Like, you need to know what resonates with them to kind of pitch this idea. So I don't want to get into too much of the generative, how it works, which you also went in your presentation of not only designing the CAD model, but loading it up for generative, and then all the various designs, dozens and dozens of them, just after a couple hours. But, and I didn't want to ask this question during your presentation because I was afraid of who was listening, but what kind of hurdles do you then have to overcome when it comes to manufacturing the parts? And I'm not saying it's impossible, but it might not always be cost effective if it's going to be mass produced at this point. Or maybe you found some secret sauce that's really working for you.
No, I wouldn't go so far as to say we found some secret sauce. Part of it is just simply keeping the spark alive that maybe someday we would make it as designed through a generative process. But the part that we showed in the presentation, for example, is, the equivalent size of like a hand cart. It's 4 feet tall by 2 feet wide by 1.5 feet deep. There are 3D printers that will make that, but that's not something we're likely to do.
Yeah.
Okay. But what we wanted to get across was that this is a provocative way that you could think about making something like this. So then we find the right people in manufacturing who look at something like that and say, we might be able to cast it.
Right.
Or what if we did something that looked like it, but using our traditional methods of either tube stock or some other kind of material? Our goal is not to get them to the finish line in one chunk. That's kind of the whole idea. What we want to get them to do is to start thinking differently. Mm-hmm. And part of what I was trying to get across today is don't try to get there in one conversation.
Yeah.
You're probably not going to be successful that way.
Yeah, you're not going to eat the elephant in one sitting, for sure.
Right.
Have you ever had elephant?
I have.
Have you ever had elephant?
I have not.
No.
That may be illegal, actually. I'm not sure.
I assume. I don't know.
Fairly certain that's bad. So, how long have you folks been using Fusion and specifically the generative design tools?
Boy, Fusion was actually very early days. I remember having Roger Orban and a couple of the guys from the training group, Jeremy and some other folks from Autodesk, came to visit us very early on. I believe it was probably even before full release.
Okay.
And it was great. It was great. We brought my team in, and the really interesting part was, a couple of the guys on my team were big users of different applications. We let them use what they want. And I still kind of laugh to myself because one of them in those first meetings was, I'm a big Alias user, and I don't know, this is interesting, but I just don't see myself converting. And I want to say within 6 to 9 months, he became the single largest proponent for Fusion in the design group.
That's interesting.
And then when generative came along, so we were again involved with generative in very early days. I think when it was still kind of lighthouse customer consideration, they were giving us little tastes of it. And most of my team at that point, if they were kind of interested, that was over the top.
Yeah.
Okay. That was a strong tool.
So, thinking of your industry, I wouldn't think that maybe Fusion, but on a lesser note, generative, I wouldn't think would be something that I would, as a salesperson, be like, oh, this is the company that needs this. Is it safe to say that Crown is very active in, reaching out for these new solutions and trying them out for just the potential that it might have in the future? Because I mean, good for our sales team to have that kind of relationship. Good for them. But I think it's impressive that they're like, oh, yeah, these guys might want to check this out.
Well, I think your team recognized that, we're known in our space for innovation. I think they were looking for people that were in the kind of commercial industrial space. And we do have a history of trying things, right? And not everything is a winner.
Yeah.
But what was interesting was, as we started to play around with this, you do have the people that think, it's not in our wheelhouse of the kinds of things that we typically do.
Right.
But when you can take the tool, when you can take generative design, and you talk to an engineer that says, well, every pound that I can get out of X portion of this truck is a pound of cargo that they can put back on the forks of the truck. So, well, I'm glad you bring that up. I might have a tool that will help you with that problem. So it wasn't even like we had to lean on our ability to want to play with innovative tools. We had active problems we were trying to solve that generative lent itself to very well.
That's really interesting.
So when you think of your product development process, and you don't need to give us all the specific details, but how has generative impacted that? Whether it's, in the middle of your current process, or this is more, future stuff. So where do you see that fitting, whether it's there now or whether it might be there in the future?
Right now, time is playing more of a component in our development timelines than it may have in the past, right? So simply having it as one of the ways that we may idea generate is very powerful. So I know the audience of different disciplines that are in generative is pretty broad. I know manufacturing folks or engineers, but as designers, the very beginning of our process is all about coming up with divergent ways we can come up with ideas. So for us, it's not about using it as a tool to get to an end. We actually use it as a way to idea generate completely divergent ideas. And we may not use one of the results literally. We may use that as a springboard for a completely different way to go about making something. So it may be like an underlay for a different idea for us, right? Something as simple as one of the guys needed to make a bracket or a clamp that we might hang on the overhead guard of a truck. Didn't really require that he do anything exotic or interesting, but he just thought, let me run it through there. And 3D printed it, threw it on the truck, just something that we ran around, and everybody that saw that said, what is that?
Yeah.
And, just those little provocations.
It's cool that the company has that or allows that kind of freedom, though. No, don't just get it done because, we have a solution, get it done now. It's that extra learning that they didn't take. That's really neat.
It is. And we're fortunate because if you can show a substantive innovation or improvement to something, they will support seeing it through and seeing it done. And that's one of the reasons that I was so excited to come to Crown.
So when you think about your presentation and your experience with generative in particular, if you looked in your magic 8 ball for the future of what what you think it could be, or maybe what you would want it to be, how it could be different, how it could have an impact? What's that feel or look like for you?
I love the strength of what it has right now. I feel excited about it stretching into more and more end processes.
Okay.
So, for example, the more that it can help inform the way we might go through fabrication processes. So I know the library of different end outcomes is continuously being built from 3D printing to casting. Mm-hmm. If we can start getting into how do I deal with sheet stock or tube stock and how, where would they be welded together?
Would be, if you could do a generative and do it with a specific tube stock.
Or just, and changing it from our library, that would be.
I didn't even think about that. Like I know there's been some stuff with the different CNC types where you can do like 2-axis now, I think is and it keeps it super simple, so it's not the bird bone organic shape, but doing something with tube stock, that would be
just purchasable materials.
Yeah.
Right?
Luke's interested.
Right.
Well, no, I've done a lot of work with like stock material where you're just you're coming up with, I think this is going to work. I'll go run an analysis. I'll try it again. But if you could just put all those inputs in and change the size and see what that would...
on a completely selfish level outside of work, right? I'm a gearhead, right? I like to build cars and motorcycles. Mm-hmm. And in a fantasy that it could provide for somebody like me is if I said, hey, I wanted to build a completely different latticed motorcycle frame, but I'm not going to 3D print that whole frame.
Yeah.
Right.
I would love for it to say, well, it's probably going to look something like this, buy stock of this wall thickness and, ladder it in here and there and put welds here and there. That'd be pretty cool.
I like that.
So one more question for me. Let's pretend that I'm an engineer, which I am.
Well,
and
ish.
I was. And
Past tense.
let's pretend that I understand the value of generative design, which Autodesk makes me say that I do. How would you suggest that I take my understanding of generative and my understanding of engineering and kind of deal with a resistant culture at my company? How could I help them understand and get on board with
they're not here at Accelerate, didn't get to see your presentation.
Right.
What's the 3-step process or 5-step process?
It's a lot of steps.
It is a lot of steps.
I think the crucial thing is to understand first who it is that you need to be talking to, and what your goal is, right? I mean, for us, it was the simple need to be able to use the tool without fear of the outcomes being immediately shot out of the sky.
Right.
Okay. So in our case, it started with not having to win over everybody in the company, but a couple peer level engineers, a couple executives, a couple people in manufacturing. And from there, we knew that it would probably manifest out. So, for example, one of the most crucial people was probably by rank one of the least important people, which was a peer level engineer to most of the people on my team. Very, very smart man, but very kind of traditional in his approaches.
Was this the one that said, oh, yeah, this is what I do in my head?
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's me, yeah.
Brilliant guy, right? But of all the people we talked to, SVPs, VPs, all the way up and down, getting his buy-in probably was this principal kind of senior staff engineer was probably the most important individual, because if he liked it, we were going to swing a lot of people. If he didn't like it, he was probably going to tell a lot of people we were wasting time.
Right.
So those of you that weren't here for the presentation online, we had a great clip from the Ghostbusters movie where they were convincing them, and the bishop was there, and it was so the fact that you put Ghostbusters and Frank Costanzo in your presentation today, you were by far my favorite presenter.
Thank you for appreciating that. Thank you. I was a little concerned I might lose too many people with those. But
No, we had a whole group in the back corner watching it yes.
That's right. Thank you.
So I think we better wrap this up here. I think we're going to get swept up by the vacuum coming our way. But Paul, I really appreciate you joining us and appreciate you presenting as well.
Appreciate the time. Thank you so much, you guys. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Well, until next time.
See you.